Using an interview with a human geographer working in your department and appropriate wider reading, describe how they do research and what this means for producing contemporary geographical knowledges.
Our presentation seeks to describe how human geographers do research and how this aids producing contemporary geographical knowledge. Contemporary geographies is a new branch of geography that has led to more awareness of socio-cultural dynamics in geography. It is a constantly evolving discipline, and human geographers' approach to geographical research is constantly adapting. We interviewed Steve Hinchliffe on his writing on risk and disease practices within Bangladesh's agriculture, his methods approaching this research, as well as other research of his. This, alongside literature on doing academic research, provided us with a clear understanding on the practice of human geography, including the methods and ethics towards gathering research. Hinchliffe's research approach mainly includes surveying and questioning of local communities, so the presentation has a core focus on this. We also discussed the limitations of human geography in producing contemporary geographical knowledge.
We interviewed academic Steve Hinchliffe to gather further information on how geographers do research and how to produce geographical knowledge. He is an ethnographer where he looks into the scientific description of people's culture, analyses the issues surrounding risk and food whilst working as a more than human geographer. He studied at Durham University as an undergraduate and then undertook a PhD at Bristol University. He is now working at Exeter University as an elected Fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences. We used his paper, Productions Without Medicalisation, Risk Practices and Disease in Bangladesh Aquaculture, published in 2021, to ask questions in our interview and gather further information on how geographers do research.
Geographical research can be a complicated process, so thought needs to go into planning in order to conduct good research. There are 6 key points that should be considered. They are to think about the questions that one will ask, the use of appropriate methods, management and production of data, the practicalities of conducting fieldwork, thought given to ethical issues, and finally how one will present the research findings. As Hinchliffe worked with the non-governmental organisations, it allowed him to have access to more information. It is important to contact the gatekeepers, the people in the organisations with the power to grant or deny access to information, as gaining access to the right people will affect what information and perspective you get.
It is important to mention that when doing research in human geography, philosophies play a large part in underpinning investigations. Over time, geography has gone through an evolution of multiple critical interpretations such as Marxism, naturalism, humanism, feminism, and postmodernism, to name just a few. Flowerdew and Martin, in their Methods of Human Geography, explain the importance that philosophy has in research strategies. They suggest that recognising philosophical debates is crucial when choosing the methods of your research. Ignorance of your philosophical roots implies a less than full understanding of what you are doing, as quoted by Flowerdew and Martin, giving a heavy implication of the importance of philosophy. In Hinchliffe's work, he uses a more than human geographies as a philosophical and methodical grounding to his work to produce contemporary geographical knowledges.
To maximise understanding of the research topic, researchers will often use multiple methods and different sources of information. When Hinchliffe was collecting his data, he used surveys and questionnaires which are more objective, time efficient, usually standardised and inexpensive to collect large quantities of data. He asked questions about the outcomes of the farm, what seeds were put into the pond, farm expenses, and how the shrimps and prawn production changed as a result. Then, to gather further information, he conducted interviews with farmers to gain a more in-depth understanding of antimicrobial resistance and why the rates of disease were high. Although surveys and interviews are essential in geographical research practice, often there is a particular demographic that volunteer to partake in these surveys. To overcome this, Hinchliffe used targeted surveys tailored to the farmers in Bangladesh to gather specific data in order to answer his research questions.
Observation follows 2 trajectories. The first one is discovering and assessing whether the phenomenon, whether it's social or cultural, occurs, and the second is when the researcher alters their own understanding of the location and its individuals. Participant observation has been defined as the foundation of ethnographic research. It has been a fundamental aspect of human geography too. This is the basis of Hinchliffe as a researcher. as in his own reference, he is more interested in understanding the details of why people do things. Hinchliffe wants to work with farmers to bring their knowledge to the table, so this is an example of participant observation. It also saw Hinchliffe collect what key methods in geography define as insider knowledge. This is a benefit as it allows researchers to become aware of new practices or new understandings of the society and the environment. It also gathers local and contextualised knowledge and provides insider knowledge too. This has great advantages for Hinchliffe's research as the level of detail and knowledge significantly increases. For instance, working with and observing multiple actors in Bangladesh, such as NGOs and farmers, provided data collection that can be counted and compared the specific features of a specified group, population, or even individuals.
Being ethical whilst conducting geographical research is vital for collecting the data that satisfies the questions asked, whilst protecting the well-being, rights and confidentiality of those who are involved in the research. As Clifford et al. States, ethical geographers are sensitive to the diversity of moral communities within which they work and are ultimately responsible for the moral significance of their deeds. A key attribute to being ethical is keeping the interviewee or subject of the research anonymous if they wish. In our interview, Hinchliffe talked about how he gave the farmers in Bangladesh the opportunity to remain anonymous, and he also thought carefully about the data that he chose to use when concluding his research to keep confidentiality and minimise the potential harm it may implement on the person being interviewed. Sometimes it is difficult to remain ethical throughout all research practices, so geographers must take responsibility for the decisions.
According to Longhurst, an interview is a verbal interchange where one person, the interviewer, attempts to elicit information from another person by asking questions. Interviews are a great way of collecting information, however there are many limitations to this method of collecting research. Firstly, language barriers pose significant challenges to interviews, as it can make communication difficult, leading to misinterpretations and inaccuracies in the interview process. Hinchliffe faced this challenge when he had to rely on his translator during his interviews to collect information on the farms. For example, in one workshop, Hinchliffe was interviewing a man who was talking very passionately about a topic. However, the translator told Hinchliffe the interviewee was talking about pesticides. Later, he found out he was actually talking about sustainability. This shows how translators can be sometimes inaccurate. Another challenge Hinchliffe faced when conducting his interviews was access to certain farms. There had been a terrorist bombing in the capital of Bangladesh, which meant that the Bangladesh government was worried and sent police escorts with them everywhere they went, which made it hard to access farms and get honest answers. This is supported by the work of Flowerdew and Martin, who state that a potential challenge of interviews is access to the interviewee's premises. They also argue that research involving interaction with others may involve emotional and psychological hazards, and so hazards should be taken into account before beginning the interview. Another challenge of the interviews is having to carefully select topics of discussion that don't offend the interviewer, as this can leave a negative impression, lead to a loss of focus and potentially missing important information in the interview. Interviews are also constrained by time, expense and formal requirements in some cases.
Hinchlife's research highlights how working with a different range of actors, such as NGOs and governments, emphasises the necessity for multi-level governance in order to commit change, and how this in future geographical research is imperative to recognise. Hinchliffe also states how a bottom-up approach is more beneficial than a top-down approach in helping farmers. He found that while you can invest money into the farmers and hatcheries, a more effective way is to work directly with the farmers, producing a more integrative system. This method of research reinforces the demand for producing contemporary geographical knowledges within research.
This project displays the vitality of geographical concepts within research. It also highlights the fundamental aspects, including what constitutes good research, and highlights how preparation is needed beforehand. It also highlights how various philosophical debates impact how research is carried out. For instance, the role of feminism and Marxism can impact how and why the research is carried out. There are multiple ways in which geographers conduct research, such as methods like observation and interviews. However, the important considerations must be undertaken. For instance, the understanding of a wide range of ethics must be considered. And lastly, geographical research will vastly impact the wider discourse and the subject significantly for the future.